The conference room at Charlotte Union Bank was so quiet you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Across the polished mahogany table, the bank manager, a young woman named Priya, said the words that stopped my world. There are no remaining distributions assigned to you. And then my son Marcus, the boy I raised to honor his elders, laughed. It wasn't a mean laugh, it was something worse. It was the sound of a game he thought he'd already won. He sat beside me, his tailored suit a shield of respectability, but his eyes held a flicker of something I'd never seen before, the cold panic of being caught. Two men in simple suits stood near the door, their presence a quiet, unmovable wall. Priya, bless her heart, had been watching us with a strange intensity from the moment we sat down. She slid the sheaf of papers back to the center of the table. "This document, Mrs. Vance," she said, her voice steady and calm, "is not a pledge form for a charity. It's an irrevocable power of attorney combined with a full liquidation request for all your assets, transferring ownership to a single corporate entity." The words hung in the sterile air, a public declaration that my son had tried to write me out of my own life. As one of the men at the door took a step forward and murmured Marcus's name, my son's confident smile finally dissolved. He was led from the room without another word to me, his shoulders slumped just enough to show the weight of his deceit. I stared down at the document, at the signature line where my name was supposed to go. A phrase from the fine print seemed to burn on the page. No remaining distributions. It was a legal term for erasure. Then, my eyes caught something at the bottom, below the empty space for my signature. Two other names were already there, witnesses, dated just the day before. I had never seen those names in my life. The tea I'd made went cold on the kitchen counter before I even remembered pouring it. The silence in this pristine condo, the one Marcus had called the perfect place for my golden years, was suddenly deafening. It wasn't a peaceful quiet. It was the heavy, waiting silence of a stage after the actors have left. On the coffee table sat a gift box with the logo of the Vance Foundation for Community Arts embossed in gold leaf. Inside was the heavy gold pen he'd given me, the one he'd wanted me to use to sign my life away. It felt like a weapon now, cold and foreign in my hand. Everything in this place, every piece of art he'd picked out, every throw pillow he'd approved, felt like a prop in a meticulously planned lie. My phone buzzed on the counter, a sharp, unwelcome sound. I picked it up. It was an email, the sender listed simply as Vance Foundation. The subject line read, "Process initiated." No greeting, no warmth, just a sterile announcement about the launch of the Eleanor Vance Literacy Program, the very fiction he had woven to lure me into that bank. It spoke of a gala, a celebration of my life's work, a future I was apparently funding but would have no part in. It was an invitation to my own ghosts party for a program that would never exist, paid for with the life my husband, David, and I had built brick by brick. A time and a place were listed for a gala I was supposedly hosting, a public performance of a love that had just been proven false. I couldn't sit still in that cold house. The walls felt like they were closing in. Every object a reminder of a trust so completely shattered. I found myself at my laptop, desperate for a connection to something real, something true. I wanted to see David's face. I remembered an old cloud drive we'd set up years ago, a digital shoebox where we stored old family photos and tax returns. It was a dusty corner of our shared life we hadn't touched since he passed. My fingers trembled as I typed in the password, a wave of grief and nostalgia washing over me. I clicked through folders of birthday parties and summer vacations, my heart aching for a simpler time. Then I saw it, a folder I didn't recognize, labeled simply Vance Holdings. Curiosity, or maybe some deeper instinct, made me click. Inside were 3 files that made the air leave my lungs. The first was a document, Estate Finalization Mom V3. It was the same power of attorney from the bank. The second was an audio file. I put on my headphones and pressed play. It was Marcus's voice, tight with stress, talking to someone I assumed was his lawyer. "We have to move now," he was saying. "The Blue Ridge creditors are getting impatient. Liquidating the Georgia assets is the only way to cover the shortfall." The Blue Ridge Mountains? Creditors? The third file was a calendar. It showed a series of appointments over the last 6 months with geologists, resort architects, and construction firms. These appointments were on the exact same days he'd called me, his voice full of warmth, to tell me about the poor children who needed libraries, about how proud he was to continue my legacy. My legacy wasn't a library. It was collateral for a failed ski resort. I went back to the document file and looked at its history. In the metadata, I saw the evolution of his plan. Version 1 had my name, with some small protections for my ongoing care. In version 2, those protections were weaker. In version 3, a red line was drawn through them entirely, with a comment in the margin that read simply, "Discuss with creditors." The next morning, I sat in a small, tidy office that smelled of old paper and strong coffee. The Senior Legal Aid Society was not glamorous, but it felt solid, real. Priya, the young bank manager who had saved me, had made the call. Across a worn wooden desk sat Mr. Henderson, a semi-retired forensic accountant with sharp, kind eyes and a calm demeanor that put me instantly at ease. He wore a simple cardigan and didn't seem impressed by big names or fancy foundations. He was a man who looked for truth in numbers. I laid out the printouts from the cloud drive, my hands shaking slightly. He read through each page without speaking, his brow furrowed in concentration. He didn't offer sympathy, he offered focus, which was far more comforting. He lingered on the metadata log, his finger tracing the dates. 6, he said finally, looking up at me over his reading glasses. His voice was gentle but firm. "Mrs. Vance, this wasn't a mistake or a moment of desperation. This was a project." For the first time, I felt a flicker of strength return. He saw it not as a family tragedy, but as a calculated series of actions, and that clarity gave me ground to stand on. He validated every suspicion, every terrible conclusion I had drawn. Then he began to draft a plan, his pen moving swiftly across a yellow legal pad. First, a temporary restraining order on all assets, filed quietly. Second, a subpoena for the foundation's complete financial records. Third, identify the 2 mystery witnesses. He tapped the printout of the signature page from the bank. "Let's find these people," he said, circling their names. "They either work for your son, or they don't exist in any official capacity related to you." He looked at me, his gaze direct. "Neither one has ever stepped inside your life, have they, Mrs. Vance?" I shook my head, the names feeling like fictional characters in my own story. An idea took root in my mind that afternoon, a need to connect Marcus's lie in Charlotte to my real life back in Savannah. I called Martha Jenkins, who had been my vice principal for 20 years and was still my dearest friend. Her voice, warm and familiar as a summer evening in Georgia, was a balm to my frayed nerves. After we caught up, I steered the conversation carefully. "Martha," I began, "I need to ask you something strange. Did Marcus ever get in touch with you or the school about a new literacy program?" There was a pause on the line. "Why, yes, Eleanor, he did," she said, her voice filled with surprise. "He came down to Savannah about 5 months ago. He was so charming, took the new principal and me out to lunch. He talked all about this new Vance Foundation and how he wanted to honor your work by building a state-of-the-art library wing for the school." My heart sank. He had performed for them too. "He was so passionate," Martha continued. "But then when I followed up with his office to get the foundation's 501c3 number for our grant applications, something odd happened. His assistant kept putting me off. Finally, I got a very curt email saying the project was being reevaluated and they'd be in touch. He had used my name, my reputation, my friends. Martha, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, do you still have that email? She said she did, and an hour later, it was in my inbox. The date his assistant had formally canceled all further communication was the exact same day the metadata on my laptop showed he had created the first draft of the file named Estate Finalization _Mom V1. He wasn't just planning to steal from me, he was methodically dismantling any possibility of his charity lie ever becoming real, ensuring no one could ask questions he couldn't answer. Back in Mr. Henderson's office, the air felt charged with purpose. He had the fraudulent document Priya had secured from the bank spread out on his desk under a bright lamp, examining it like a biologist studying a specimen. "This isn't sloppy," he said, tapping a printout of the signature page. "This is constructed to look legitimate from a distance, but it falls apart under any real scrutiny." He pointed to a small, almost invisible digital stamp at the bottom of the page. "See the timestamps on the digital signature certificate? 11:30 p.m. on a Sunday. And look here," he said, pointing to the witness information. "The driver's license numbers they provided are from Oregon and Florida. Two people from opposite ends of the country just happened to be in your son's office on a Sunday night to witness a document signing?" He shook his head slowly. "The notary log at the bank has no record of this document ever being presented. The witness addresses are private mailboxes." He took off his glasses and looked at me directly. "This isn't just a family dispute, Mrs. Vance. This is a textbook case of financial elder abuse, carefully put together to defraud. He thought no one would ever look this closely." He picked up his phone, his movements calm and deliberate. "We're filing an ex parte motion for a temporary protective order," he explained quietly. "That means his side won't be notified beforehand. The judge will see our evidence, and if they agree, they'll issue the order. It will go into effect silently, like a lock clicking into place." That night, unable to sleep, I started going through old boxes I'd brought from Savannah, looking for my own financial papers to give to Mr. Henderson. Tucked in a folder with old tax receipts, I found it. It was an old estate plan David and I had drafted with a local lawyer more than a decade ago. We hadn't been wealthy people, but we were careful. We had saved, invested, and planned for a quiet and secure future. But this document was more than just numbers and accounts. Attached to the front was a page we had written ourselves, titled A Statement of Our Values. It was our life's work on paper. It explicitly stated our wishes that our home in Savannah, the one filled with 40 years of memories, should be protected. It designated a significant portion of our savings to a real, named literacy fund at the local community foundation, a cause that had been the cornerstone of my career. Reading our own words, I could almost hear David's voice, steady and certain. Then I saw the note, a handwritten addendum in David's familiar, slightly slanted script, dated just a few months before he passed away. My breath caught in my throat. It read, "Spoke with Marcus about our wishes for the fund. He understands completely. He said he would handle this and be the guardian of our legacy." He had known. He had looked his dying father in the eye and promised to protect the very dream he was now trying to burn to fund his own failures. I took a picture of that note with my phone, the timestamp a new piece of evidence. It was copied and ready for Mr. Henderson by morning. A few days later, an email from Mr. Henderson arrived. It contained only one sentence, "Temporary restraining order granted." I read the words 3 times. I didn't cheer or cry. I simply sat down in my kitchen chair and exhaled, a long, slow breath that felt like it carried weeks of tension with it. The court had frozen all my accounts. A quiet, invisible shield had been thrown up around me. Marcus couldn't touch a single dime. The relief was immense, but it was cut short that same afternoon. A courier on a bicycle delivered a thick, cream-colored envelope. The paper was heavy, expensive. Inside was a glossy, professionally designed invitation to the inaugural gala for the Vance Foundation for Community Arts. My son, Marcus Vance, was listed as the guest of honor and keynote speaker. He was moving forward with the lie, doubling down on the performance. I turned the invitation over. On the back, in elegant script, was a tribute to the foundation's inspiration. It was a paragraph about me. It spoke of my lifetime of service to the children of Savannah and how my work had inspired this new chapter of giving, curated by the son who honors her legacy. The hypocrisy was so profound, it was almost breathtaking. He was trying to erase my financial existence with one hand while polishing a trophy with my name on it with the other, all for public display. I went to the gala. I chose a simple, elegant navy blue dress, one of my favorites from my days as a principal, and I wore the pearl earrings David had given me for our 30th anniversary. I needed to feel like myself, not the confused old woman his lawyers would later try to paint me as. Walking into that ballroom was like stepping into another world. It was a world Marcus had built, filled with people who knew his name but not his character. There were displays set up on easels, professionally printed photos of smiling children holding books. In a glass case, they had arranged what they labeled Eleanor's Favorites, a collection of classic children's stories. I recognized one of them. I'd bought it myself for 50 cents at a yard sale back home. My name wasn't on the card. I moved through the crowd like a ghost, a living exhibit in my son's fabricated museum. People I'd never met approached me, their faces beaming. "Mrs. Vance, what a wonderful thing your son is doing," one woman said, squeezing my arm. "You must be so proud." I smiled and nodded, the words catching in my throat. I was gathering intelligence. Then Marcus took the stage. He was a natural performer, his voice smooth and confident as he told stories about my career, half-truths and embellished memories that made me sound like a saint and him like a devoted disciple. He was weaponizing our life together. Then he used a phrase that sent a chill down my spine. "We are opening a new chapter of giving," he declared, his arms outstretched, "one that is secured for the future." I froze. It was the exact phrase I had seen in an email from his lawyer on the cloud drive, a discussion about the finality of the power of attorney. The email was dated the week I was in the hospital for a minor knee surgery, a time when I was vulnerable and distracted. Mr. Henderson's quiet investigation bore fruit a few days after the gala. He had tracked down the two names from the witness list. One was out of the country. The other was a young man, barely 25, who worked as a junior marketing assistant at Marcus's real estate firm. Racked with guilt and fearing legal trouble, the young man agreed to meet us at a neutral coffee shop. He sat across from me and Mr. Henderson, unable to meet my eyes, nervously stirring a sugar packet into a coffee he never drank. His name was Kevin. He called me and my colleague into his office that Sunday night. Kevin began, his voice low. He said it was an emergency, a family matter. He had the document ready. He looked at his phone, scrolling back through his calendar. 7:43 p.m., Sunday, he read. The calendar entry just says witness signatures. The location was our office. He told me you were waiting in the car, feeling unwell, and that you had already signed. He said it was just a formality. He finally looked at me, his eyes filled with apology. "I never saw you, Mrs. Vance. I just signed where he pointed. I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly, his expression unreadable. "Kevin," he asked gently, "can you get us the building's security logs for that Sunday?" The young man nodded, eager to help. The next day, he sent the file. The logs were clear and damning. The entire office building had been locked down at 6 p.m. that Sunday. No one had entered or exited after that time. Marcus's keycard was never used. There was no meeting. The document wasn't just improperly witnessed, it was a complete fabrication, signed somewhere else entirely by people who were never there. The first official response from Marcus's legal team arrived by courier. It was a polished, threatening letter, full of legal jargon and veiled condescension. It suggested I was suffering from age-related confusion and being manipulated by outside parties with their own agendas. It was an attempt to paint me as a frail, incompetent old woman, to discredit me before I could even present my case. I read it, and a cold, hard anger settled in my chest. This was not the boy I had raised. Mr. Henderson read it too, his lips tightening into a thin line. "They're trying to bully you into silence," he said. "We won't let them." With my blessing, he didn't write a long, argumentative letter in response. He prepared a single, comprehensive rebuttal packet. It was a masterpiece of quiet force. He sent it by special courier directly to the head of Marcus's legal team. Inside, there was no emotional plea, just cold, hard facts. The first document was Kevin's sworn affidavit detailing the fraudulent signing. The second was the building's security access log showing no one was in the office that night. The third was the metadata log from my cloud drive, proving the document's 6-month evolution from a plan of care to a plan of seizure. The fourth was a high-resolution copy of David's handwritten values draft, a testament to my son's broken promise to his father. The final page of our packet was not an argument, but a simple, formal request for a side-by-side forensic ink and paper comparison of the original document to be conducted by a neutral third party. We had our answer in 2 hours. Marcus's lawyers called Mr. Henderson. They had agreed to the comparison, but with a condition. It had to be presented not in court, but at a private bank governance meeting they had requested. They wanted to keep this behind closed doors. The bank's boardroom was on the top floor, with a view of the entire Charlotte skyline. The table was a long, gleaming piece of dark wood, and the chairs were upholstered in expensive leather. Marcus was there with 2 lawyers, all of them looking confident and composed. He wouldn't look at me. I sat beside Mr. Henderson, my back straight, my hands folded calmly in my lap. I had a stack of simple manila envelopes in front of me. Marcus's lead lawyer began, his voice smooth and conciliatory. "Mrs. Vance has graciously agreed to resolve this family misunderstanding privately." Before he could finish, I took the first envelope and slid it across the polished table to the bank's chairman, who sat at the head. The chairman, a stern-looking man in his 70s, opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the building access log from my son's office. As he read it, I slid a second envelope to the board member next to him. That one contained Kevin's sworn affidavit. A third envelope, with the metadata log, went to the next person. A fourth, with David's handwritten note, followed. The evidence began to circulate around the table, hand to hand, in absolute silence. The only sound was the soft rustle of paper. Marcus had started to give a speech about family values and continuity, but his voice faltered as he watched the documents move from one stony-faced board member to the next. He stopped talking. The evidence was speaking for him. The room was heavy with the weight of unspoken truth. The bank's chairman finally cleared his throat, his eyes fixed on the papers in front of him, not on Marcus. "This vote on the power of attorney is postponed indefinitely," he said softly. Then he leaned toward his colleague on his right and whispered a phrase I could just barely hear: "Full third-party review." There was no dramatic courtroom confession, no tearful apology. There was only the quiet, efficient machinery of consequences. A few days after the board meeting, Mr. Henderson received a formal notice. Marcus, through his lawyers, had withdrawn the power of attorney document and filed a motion to dismiss all legal claims related to my assets. It was over. The public relations firm he employed released a statement about him stepping down from his role at the Vance Foundation to protect the Vance family's privacy and ensure the ongoing integrity of the foundation's mission. The foundation itself, which had never done anything but exist on paper, would be managed by an interim oversight committee while its affairs were reviewed. The quiet war was over. I had won back what was already mine. Tucked inside the thick stack of formal legal documents from his lawyer was a smaller, private envelope with my name on it. Mr. Henderson passed it to me. Inside was a single sheet of notepaper. In my son's familiar, looping script, there was just one sentence: "You were right to protect what mattered." It wasn't an apology for what he had done, but an admission that I had stopped him. It wasn't forgiveness I was looking for, but the simple, undeniable truth. And there it was, in his own hand. I didn't want vengeance. I wanted to restore what was real. Instead of pursuing damages, I took a portion of my now secured savings and drove down to Savannah. The old elementary school where I had spent 42 years of my life smelled exactly the same, a comforting mix of floor wax, chalk dust, and old books. The plaque with my name on it by the library door was weathered by time, but the promise behind it was still bright. I met with the new principal, a bright young woman with the same fire in her eyes I once had. I didn't tell her the whole sordid story. I just told her I wanted to fulfill a promise my late husband and I had made to the community. We established the David and Eleanor Vance Reading Nook, a small, cozy corner of the library with new bookshelves, comfortable chairs, and hundreds of new books for the children. It was a tangible legacy, something a child could touch. As a final act, I asked the principal if she would archive our original values draft, David's note and all, in the school's historical records. It was a way of ensuring our true intent would be preserved forever. As she was filing it away behind an old student ledger, she found a sealed envelope from my retirement party nearly a decade ago that had slipped down and been forgotten. She handed it to me. Inside was a letter from a former student, now a lawyer in Savannah. He wrote about how my belief in him had changed his life. At the bottom, he had offered to provide free estate planning services to me anytime, as a small way to honor my work. It was an offer I'd long forgotten, from a promise that was real. A few months later, I attended a modest luncheon in Charlotte for the Senior Legal Aid Society. It was their annual volunteer appreciation event, held in a clean but simple community hall. There was no fanfare. Mr. Henderson was asked to say a few words. He didn't speak of the crime or the betrayal. He spoke of resilience, dignity, and the importance of a legal system that protects the vulnerable. He mentioned my name briefly, not as a victim, but as a person who stood her ground with quiet strength. When he finished, the people in the room, mostly volunteers and fellow clients, didn't applaud loudly. They nodded, a quiet, knowing acknowledgement from people who had heard a story and finally understood its ending. My name was cleared. My identity was my own again. After the luncheon, I didn't stay to make small talk. I simply walked out of the building into the cool afternoon air. I was wearing a small enameled pin on my lapel, a tiny apple with a bookworm, a gift from my first class of first graders. It was a quiet talisman of my real life's work. Ahead of me was an open sky, and I felt the solid ground beneath my feet. The story was finally finished, this time written in a hand that could never be erased.